Do you guys ever get as annoyed as I do when you hear all these real estate agents out there saying, buy a home, it's always the best time to buy right now? Or even worse, marry the house, date the rate? That's a good one. But are they right? Is now a good time to buy a house with 8% interest rates, close to all-time high prices, and a lot of economic uncertainty? Or is it better to rent now and see where all of this uncertainty leads us before purchasing in 2024? Let's get to it. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you didn't already know, my name's Jay Costa. I'm a real estate agent, investor, and builder here in Northern New Jersey. And if you get value out of this video, please hit the like button down below. It truly helps me grow the channel. Also consider subscribing because we're building a tight-knit community here of like-minded individuals looking to build wealth in real estate. So if that interests you, definitely check out our previous videos and consider subscribing. And in this video, guys, I'm gonna go over the pros and the cons of buying a house versus renting a house in 2024. Which one is actually cheaper right now? And I'm gonna give you some questions to ask yourselves and help you decide whether you should be buying or renting a house in 2024. So you've heard it all before from these agents. Renting's throwing money down the drain. Renting is paying your landlord's mortgage instead of your own. You'll never build wealth without owning your own home. And according to these agents, it's basically never a good time to rent a property because the pros of buying so far outweigh the cons that you'd be an idiot to even consider renting a house. Listen, I'm a real estate agent myself, and there's a lot of good real estate agents out there, but most of them just got their license within the last 2 years and sell no more than a couple houses a year. So they're far from experts and far from economists. So don't listen to them. Instead, listen to me, a lifetime C-grade student who has no idea what's going to happen. And I'm here to tell you that no, you're not an idiot for considering to rent instead of buy in this market. In fact, since the mortgage rates increased from under 3% to close to 8% where we're at now, it is actually significantly cheaper to rent a home compared to buying that same home. The affordability to buy a home right now in the United States is at an all-time low level. So affordability-wise, right now, it is better to rent than to buy on the surface. And cost aside, there's positive aspects to renting a home in any market. Like number one, you get flexibility when you rent a property that you simply do not get when you own a home. So if you're single or maybe just starting out, significant otherwise, whatever, if you're just starting out in a career, probably no kids, and you don't know exactly where you're going to end up, I would definitely recommend considering renting. Because if you live in a place for a year or two or even 3, and you realize, hey, another opportunity, maybe a job opportunity, or maybe you meet someone in another city, you could pick up and leave fairly easily. You can't do that if you own your property. Not very easily anyway. The second positive to renting is the fact that you don't have to worry at all about home repairs. If a water heater goes, if the roof starts leaking, you simply call your landlord and they come and fix it, no questions asked. There's a lot of value to not having to worry about dealing with all that stuff and paying for all that stuff unexpectedly. So keep that in mind. Lastly would be the opportunity costs. So what do I mean by opportunity costs? Well, I'm simply talking about comparing the money that you need to rent compared to the money that you need to buy. And those numbers are significantly different. So to rent, you're most likely going to have like a 1 or 1.5 month security deposit to cover, and potentially maybe a 1 month broker's fee if there's brokers involved. So if you're looking at a place that's like $3,000 a month, you figure $4,500 for the security deposit, another $3,000 for a broker fee if needed. And I'd like to dig deeper a little bit when it comes to home affordability. As far as I can see, home affordability depends on 3 main factors. Number 1 would be the interest rates. Number 2 would be home prices. And number 3 would be the wages that we earn as Americans. You see, during COVID, when interest rates were very low, home prices were going up and wages were also going up, it was very easy to see how home affordability was actually a pretty good bargain at the time. And actually, the last time I made a video on this was probably almost 2 years ago now when interest rates just started to pop up. In fact, if you compared the average price to own compared to the average price to rent in the United States, it was about the same. But now with interest rates higher, home prices still very high, right? And wages going up, but very, very slightly, not even close to the same rate as inflation. We're looking at a situation where the cost to buy is much more expensive than the cost to rent as of right now. But there are cons to renting as well, and we're gonna go over those right now. The biggest con to renting, in my opinion, is the uncertainty. So this is actually the biggest pro. It would be the flexibility when it comes to renting, but it is also the biggest con. And that's why I asked if you are single or if you're just starting out, because if you're single, just starting out in a career, whatever, you don't really need to be tied to one place. But if you have a family, the uncertainty that renting gives you every time can be very unsettling and lead to a lot of stress and aggravation. For instance, you could be living in a home for 5 or 6 years, renting it, and all of a sudden the landlord at the end of your lease renewal says, hey, I'm going to move in myself, or hey, I'm going to sell it because I need the money. You cannot stay there. You have to find a new place. You have to uproot your whole family's life out of that house and go find another one. With a wife and 2 kids, that wouldn't be for me. The second biggest negative or con to renting is that you're not building any equity in real estate. So we've talked about this many times on this channel, of course, and I'm sure you've already heard a lot of it, but when you own a home, no matter what you're putting down, 5% or 20%, once you start making payments, you start building equity almost right away. And the reason for that is not even the value appreciation as it is the pay down of the mortgage. And there are ways to use that home equity to your advantage. More information on that later. The way I see home equity and mortgage payments, it's basically like a forced savings account. And there is value to that because a lot of people, in my opinion, need forced savings accounts because they don't save money and they outspend their means. That's why when you hear the statistic that, a certain, I don't have it off the top of my head, but a certain percentage of millionaires in this country, like of the vast majority of them, are millionaires through real estate. Well, I have a feeling that a lot of those real estate millionaires simply bought their house a very long time ago and they don't owe anything on it anymore, or they owe very little, and now the house is worth over $1 million. The last negative to renting would be the fact that you can't customize it. You can't make it your own because it's not your house. When you sign a lease for a home, the landlord may be okay with you repainting as long as they're okay or they approve of the colors that you pick, but there's no renovations, there's no add-ons, there's no doing anything that would substantially change the property that would make it more fitting to you and your lifestyle and your family's lifestyle. So back to the general economy here, with mortgage rates close to 8%, inflation eating away at all of our wallets, and home prices still at close to all-time highs, some would say maybe it's like the worst time to buy right now. But in no matter what market that we're in, there's always going to be pros and positive aspects to buying a home. Like number one, we just mentioned before on the other end of it, you build equity and it's a forced savings account. So let's say you buy a $500,000 house and let's say you put the full 20% down. That would be $100,000. Right then and there, you saved $100,000 of your own money that you can't go use to outspend your means. Then, right away, and as time goes on, you pay down that mortgage more and more and more. And the longer you pay down that mortgage, the more of it goes to principal and the less of it goes to interest. The second reason why I would always consider buying is the fact that you have stability in where you live. Like I said before, if you need flexibility, renting is a tremendous option. But if you have roots that you want to put down in a town, in a community, buying, even at these higher prices and these higher interest rates, if you can afford it, is always going to be a beneficial one for you and your family. And the reason for that is it's your home, and the only people that can force you to move is the bank that you borrowed the money from for the mortgage. Number three is the fact that you can customize the home. Maybe it has 4 bedrooms, but you only need 3, and you work, or your wife or your husband works from home. You could turn one into a home office very simply without any sort of approval from any landlord. Number 4 is that you do get tax benefits when you own real estate. Now, I am no accountant, but as far as what I handle every single year, I know that every year at the end of the year, I get a tax form from my mortgage lender showing me exactly how much I paid in mortgage interest for that year. I send that to my accountant and they deduct that from my income. You can also deduct a certain amount if you use some of it as a home office, as well as use the SALT deduction if you're in a high property tax state like me. You can deduct up to $10,000 of your property taxes. Too bad I pay over double that. And lastly, when you start looking through some of these YouTube videos about renting versus buying, a lot of people take into account the opportunity cost lost from using the money that you have on a down payment. So let's say you buy that $500,000 house, you take $100,000 for a 20% down payment. That money you could be invested elsewhere in something that gives you a better return potentially. But that is not taking into account the fact that you can still use that equity to invest. In fact, on this channel, we talk a lot about investing with a home equity line of credit. Now, investing with a home equity line of credit is not for everybody, but if you are interested in that, I will put a link in the description box down below, as well as up in the corner here, showing you all of my videos, how to invest in real estate using home equity lines of credit, what are the best and worst ways to use a HELOC, and how to use your home equity safely and effectively in order to build wealth. So finally, let's go over the cons, the negative aspects of buying and owning a home. Well, number one would be what I just talked about, and that is both the down payment as well as the closing costs. It is much more expensive to get started when you're owning a home as opposed to renting a home. Closing costs could be somewhere between, let's say, 1 or 2% of the purchase price, and then the down payment could be anywhere from 3.5% all the way up to 20% of the purchase price. Number two would be the home repairs and the maintenance. In addition to having to have all of those funds ready to go for the closing costs and the down payment in order to buy it, you'll also need money stashed away in case of unforeseen repairs or maintenance that you need to do to the property. And trust me, it usually happens basically right after you buy it. Many people don't have that kind of cash sitting and waiting ready to go, or even if they did, a lot of the times people don't want that kind of cloud sitting over their head of any potential unexpected or unforeseen repairs being needed. Let's say your roof starts leaking tomorrow in a big rainstorm. All of a sudden, the roof guy comes and says, you need a new roof. That could cost anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. And that can lead to a lot of stress and aggravation for many people. And lastly, number three would be the property taxes. A lot of the times when you look at these like graphs that show renting, the cost of renting versus the cost of buying, when it shows the cost of buying, it's not even showing the property taxes. And it's definitely not showing what we mentioned before, like unforeseen repairs and maintenance. And you'll also need insurance, although some tenants do have home insurance as well on their belongings. Given all of this, should you buy a home or rent a home in 2024? Which one is better for you? Well, I don't have the answer for you. It's going to depend on your situation, of course. But the first question I would ask is, can you afford it? With interest rates and living expenses and inflation rising so much faster than our wages in the past 2 years, when you get that monthly mortgage kind of quote from a mortgage lender or mortgage broker, there can be some sticker shock. Just because it's higher doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. But you may be getting yourself into some trouble if you start listening to mortgage lenders as well as real estate agents when they say you can marry the house and date the rate. Listen, you can potentially refinance the house in the future if and when mortgage rates come down. But do not, please do not buy a house now expecting and relying on interest rates to go down next year. They could go down, they could go up, they could stay the same. Nobody knows. Do you need flexibility? As I mentioned before, are you single or are you just getting started with your career where you may even get transferred for your career to a different city? Or maybe you have yet to meet someone to marry or something like that where you don't even know what part of the country you're going to be living in the future? Then you should probably or almost definitely rent unless you do something that's called a house hack. A house hack is basically when you buy a multifamily property for yourself to live in one unit and you rent out the other unit. That is always a good idea because if you do that, you can live in that property for at least 1 year and then you can go move anywhere you'd like and still keep that property as an investment property. That is definitely a great option to consider. But if you don't need the flexibility and your roots are already starting to be grown in that particular neighborhood or community and you can afford it, I would probably err on the side of buying. Also, you have to consider what is your time frame. If you only want to live somewhere for a short period of time, you should almost definitely rent. But if you're going to be living in this property for at least 7 to maybe up to 10 years and up, you should consider buying. Because no matter what interest rates do, no matter what home values do, no matter what wages do, 7 to 10 years from now, you're going to pay down that mortgage significantly. And lastly, you have to consider how much you actually have to get started. So if you have enough for a down payment and closing costs and unexpected repairs, and you could afford the monthly payment that the lenders are quoting you, and you're going to plan on staying there for at least 7 to 10 years, you should buy. But if the answer is no to any of those, you should almost definitely rent. It's that simple, guys. That's it for today. Drop a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what your thoughts are heading into 2024, whether it's better to buy right now or to rent right now. Is there any way that you would buy in this market? As you can see, there are pros and cons to both in any market, but this market is particularly tricky. Let me know in the comment section what you think about it, and I will see you next time.